Oh.
Janice opens up and she says, well, I don't have parents. And she starts walking Gwen through her life story, and it's pretty heartbreaking. Janice said her first real memory started when she was like 8 years old. Before that, she doesn't really remember much. She just remembers she's 8, and a stranger found her wandering around a ship by herself. Like a giant boat. Not even like a cruise, like I'm talking like a shipping container boat. Her parents were nowhere to be found. I don't know, they may have lost her, but more likely Janice believes that they just completely abandoned her. The stranger was nice and thankfully not a child predator, because they helped post Janice's name and picture on Facebook. Okay, I don't know if that's a good idea, but you get it. And they were posting on online forums to see if her parents were looking for her. Nobody ever responded. Finally, Janice is dropped off at the Philippines version of CPS, the Department of Social Welfare and Development. We're just going to call it DWSD. And that's where Janice stayed. So she's bouncing around from home to home. And then recently, she was offered a job as a live-in nanny for this young family. And she took it. Okay, so she hates the job. She hates it. But don't get me wrong, she's so grateful for this opportunity. I mean, to have like a family take her in and let her live with them, that's a great job. You know, it's sad though. She like gets to see these young kids live this amazing life with a family that care about her. She sees Gwen and all the teenagers at the gatherings being, you know, teenagers. They have stress, but it's different. They have parents to comfort them. She told Gwen one of the things that she wished for the most growing up. She just wished that she could run around with kids. She wished that when she was running around, she would fall down, scrape her knee, and she could just have a mom to run to that would hug her and put her on her lap and blow on her knee and tell her, it's okay, I got you. I mean, even now, Janice said she wished that all she had to worry about was getting good grades and getting accepted into college and not getting fired and being without a home and having nothing to fend for herself. So Gwen is really emotional when she hears Janice's story. I mean, for one, she had come to see Janice as her sister. So to hear about how hard her life was, I mean, it was rough. But another reason was, I'm sure it touched on the privilege that Gwen felt like she had. To know that she was lucky enough that she could always depend on her parents to be there. So, like, side note, Gwen's parents, they're not like free-for-all parents. They're not showering her with amazing, luxurious items and, like, letting her do whatever she wants. Just because they were doing okay didn't mean that they were spoiling the kids. Each member of their family, they had their own set of chores. Everyone had to pitch in. The kids had to study. They had to get good grades. Everyone had to be responsible. They had to go to church on Sundays. Like, there were a lot of rules. They were actually pretty strict parents. But Gwen and Louis had come to really respect their parents for that. They really were raised really, really well. Like, I think the fact that Gwen and Louis are even comfortable enough to ask their parents to adopt Janice, that just shows you how tight they are, how close they are. So Janice moves in. She gets formally adopted, okay? She moves into Louis' room. He moves out. He's permanently on couch duty now. And from the moment that Janice moves in, everyone treats her like family. They wanted her to feel like at home. They enrolled her in a school immediately. I mean, she had all this room to breathe now. She didn't wake up every single morning to worry about work and putting food on the table. She was just a kid. She said for the first time she had the luxury of daydreaming about her future. Like what her dreams are gonna be, what she wants to be when she grows up. She had never done that before. So after moving in, the three siblings, they get closer and closer. They kept doing their photo shoots, hanging out all the time. Janice even went on vacation with the McGuad family for the first time. So, really close. Now, I do want to make it clear. Not everything was sunshine and rainbows. I'm sure any adoptive parent will tell you that it's freaking hard when a new child has to get accustomed to their like new environment, learn the rules, and even just to trust the adoptive parents. It's a long process. There's this long, hard grace period you have to go through. And it's completely normal for there to be hiccups along the way. You just have to be open about it, which the McGuads were. I really do think that them being educators helped them in this whole process. They were always patient and understanding. So Janice's first hiccup came a few months after her adoption. The McGuad family had land and a few pigs that they were raising on this land. So they have little pigsters. And Cruz sold one of these pigs for about $200 US. He takes a little cash, it's a bunch of small bills. He puts it in a little cash jar in the primary bedroom because he knew that, I don't know, maybe he'll need it for an emergency one day. The same month, his elderly parents test positive for COVID. Now, in the Philippines in 2021, there were these quarantine facilities that you have to go to. So at least in this area. So his parents, they're being quarantined in a government facility and they would need money for food and supplies while they were stuck in there. Cruz is like, okay, perfect. I knew that $200 was going to come in handy. He runs to grab it from his little glass jar and it's freaking empty. It's gone. He's like, that's so weird. So he asks his wife, hey babe, like, have you seen the money? She's like, no, why would I touch the money? He asks his kids, and they're like, no, I haven't seen the freaking pig money. Like, why would it, where, what? He's like, okay, well, do you guys know where it would be? Everyone's shrugging. They have no idea. They all start helping Cruz search for the missing money. Cruz even wondered if maybe thieves had gotten into the house to take the money, but that didn't make sense because nothing else was stolen. And usually someone was home, so wouldn't they have known? They also have these big dogs that bark like crazy at strangers. So he's genuinely puzzled by this. It's like, this is a case of missing money. This is mind-boggling to me. The family look around for hours. You know, the family is doing well enough to feed the kids and everyone. They're financially stable to a degree, but they don't just have a ton of extra money laying around. So Cruz really was counting on this $200 to give to his parents. He needed it. They're doing everything. Couch cushions, under the refrigerator, under the stove. They're turning over all of the rugs. And one of the kids picks up Janice's backpack. Not because they think it's in Janice's backpack, but to search the ground underneath Janice's backpack. Her backpack was suspiciously heavy. Again, he had received small bills for the sale of the pig, including, I believe, like heavier coins maybe. And so it's not just like two $100 bills. They're like, oh, that's weird because we're doing remote learning. We don't really have a lot of textbooks in our bags right now. So they thought, what the hell? Why is her backpack so heavy? But they didn't accuse her. They just kind of glanced at Janice, and she saw the kid, her sibling, holding her backpack, and it was just, the look of guilt was so clear on her face. It was clear as day. She confesses. Turns out, Janice had a secret compartment that she made in her backpack. So you know the bottom flap of your backpack, you open it up and you look inside and you're like, oh, that's the bottom of the backpack. Well, she undid the seam, created a little empty space between the fabric and the actual inner lining of the bottom of the backpack, hid the cash in there, sewed it back on, basically creating a false bottom for her backpack. Very crafty. But the crazy thing is, and this is why I'm like, I don't know if I can be a parent because it takes so much patience and understanding, because I'd be like, why'd you do that? That's crazy. But Cruz wasn't even angry. He was disappointed. He's human. And her new family, they all looked at her confused and disappointed. But Janice was breaking down. She's like, I'm so sorry. I don't even know why I did that. Like, I know you probably hate me now. It's awful. I'm so sorry from stealing from you. Please, like, I totally get it. If you want to kick me out of the house, if you want me gone, like, I get it if you never trust me again. But please, I'm just so sorry. I really don't know why I did that. The McGuards were hurt, but they also kind of understood. So Janice had grown up with nothing. She didn't have the security that the McGuad kids had grown up with. And side note, stealing is actually very common in families with recent adoptees, especially with money and food. It comes from the child's scarcity mindset. So, I mean, think about it. If you never know where your next meal or money for your next meal or even shoes or socks is coming from, and now you're suddenly in a place with an abundance of food, of course you're gonna think, I should probably grab some more so I can save it for later when I inevitably need it again. There's no way you're just going to take it for granted immediately and be like, this is my life now, unlimited food. These children truly believe this family's going to let them go, they're going to face scarcity again, and they need to stock up. I know it's messed up that she stole the money, but it's kind of heartbreaking when you think about the psychology of why an adopted child might steal from their new families. So yeah, the McGuads were disappointed, but they got it. They understood. And it didn't matter to them because it's like when your kid makes a mistake, what do? They're still your kid. And Janice is their kid. That's how they thought about it. Janice is our daughter. Of course, we're not going to turn our backs on her because she did something wrong. She just needs guidance. So after this little hit, the family focuses on rebuilding that trust. And it wasn't this, Janice, you made us lose our trust in you, so earn it back. It was more so the McGuads trying to comfort Janice, to reaffirm in her belief that they're family now and she never has to worry about food for as long as all of them live because she's family. After this incident, the family actually come out stronger than before, more bonded together. Gwen started tutoring Janice when everything went into remote learning. And December 10th of 2021, before the McGuad parents left for work, Janice turned to them and called them mom and dad. It was supposed to be a very, very, very good day. But there was a problem. Janice, their adopted daughter, whom they thought was legally categorized as an orphan, meaning without parents. Well, it turns out, Janice wasn't even an orphan. In fact, she was regularly communicating with her mom on Facebook.
What?
So what the hell is going on here? Back to the day of the murder, December 10th of 2021. I'm not sure how Cruz's coworker knew that the family home had been ransacked. Maybe he saw Janice's Facebook post or someone he knew had seen it. But Cruz rushes home, finds 2 of his children dead in the living room. He tries to check if there was anything, a small pulse.
Failed to connect to the server. You are not whitelisted. But I am whitelisted. Failed to connect to the server. You are not whitelisted. But I am failed to connect to the server. You are not whitelisted.
Or anything, but there was nothing. It said Cruz dropped to the ground and he cried out. He's religious. He cried out, "Lord, why did you have to take both of them? Why do I have to lose both of them?" Dropped to the ground, or dead in the face. Oh, with her mom on here. Back to the day of the murder. December 10th of 2021. I'm not sure how Cruz's coworker knew that the family home had been ransacked. Maybe he saw Janice's Facebook post or someone he knew had seen it. But Cruz rushes home, finds 2 of his children dead in the living room. He tries to check if there was anything, a small pulse or anything, but there was nothing. It said Cruz dropped to the ground and he cried out. He's religious. He cried out, "Lord, why did you have to take both of them? Why do I have to lose both of them? Why?" And then he collects himself as best as he can because he's still a father. He has to look for his 3rd child. So he's scrambling and he's praying that he wouldn't stumble across another dead body. And he calls her name out and finally he hears like the creaking of a door, like you know when you crack it open. And he hears her voice and he screams, "Janice!" And he runs to her room and he's putting his hands on her head and shoulders and arms and he's frantically checking all over her to see if like she's hurt. She wasn't hurt, but she's dripping wet. And for a split second, he was panicked that it was blood. But it wasn't. It was water. We're going to come back to this
His
detail.
clothing too?
Her hair is like soaking wet in water. He made sure that she was okay, rushed them out, and he kept asking her, "Are you sure you're okay? Are you hurt? Why is your hair wet? Are you sure it's not blood? Are you bleeding anywhere?" Janice is like hyperventilating. She's explaining 3 men came into the house. They attacked Gwen and Boy Boy. She had enough time to run into her room. She hid under the bed. She was so terrified. The screams were so loud. There were so many screams. She was so scared. She knew that she couldn't help her siblings and she didn't know what to do or how to even do it. And then finally it went silent. She didn't know what to do. She was so stressed. She was having a panic attack. So the only thing that she could think to do in the moment was to take a bath.
Take a bath?
Yeah, okay, so this whole bath thing is interesting, but we're gonna come back to it, okay? It's just very odd, because, you know, I know what you're thinking, and maybe we're on the same page, let me know, but I feel like a bath is very vulnerable. Like, when you're in a bath, you're naked and in a slippery, wet tub, defenseless. It just feels like the last thing you want to do in a situation where your environment doesn't feel secure. But again, people grieve differently. They respond to shock differently. Maybe she was in a state of shock where even her brain wasn't registering because, you know, our brains like to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I can't imagine like bath and shower, because even shower, like you close your eyes, you're in the water, you can't hear things well.
And then you got to get the towel. Like that's a horror movie.
And then bath too. It's just not. Yeah, none of that makes sense.
And then the water filling up the tub is really loud typically. And it takes a while and you're like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. So Cruz comforts her. And honestly, he stayed strong for her because 2 of his children are dead. He keeps it together so that she doesn't break down further. He felt like she had already been through enough. Mrs. Magard Lavella arrives at the scene just after the police, and she sees Janice standing there, soaking wet, crying. And she rushes up, she hugs her, and she's like, oh my God, thank God you're okay. Are you all right? What happened? Where are Gwen and Boy Boy? Cruz was the one to tell his wife and the mother of his children that their 2 kids were dead. Mrs. Magard Lavella is an elementary school principal. She was very loved for being this soft-spoken person. When you're an elementary school principal, you have to be calm, collected. You have to know what to do in the event of a crisis. You have to know how to handle these things. Kids, parents, staff, literally everyone trusted her to know what to do in every situation. But in this situation, there's like no answer. There's no solution. And it's said that Mrs. McGuad completely broke down in every sense of the word. She was a broken woman and a broken mother. And I think Cruz, seeing his wife break down to the core like this, he had been holding it in for Janice. I think just seeing the devastation in his wife, he broke down. And so the three of them, they're outside the house crying in each other's arms, and the McGuad house was taped off as a crime scene. The police were really busy inside. They found like an abundance of evidence in the living room, just scattered everywhere. There were a few different things that could have been used as murder weapons. So there was this bloody baseball bat, a hammer, a few kitchen knives, including the one near the front door, pans, pots, shattered glass bottles, and they had to log all the evidence, take it all in, and they tried to match the weapons with the injuries on the siblings. Gwen had been stabbed to death, and it seemed very personal. And we know this through all the cases that we've covered over the years, but when a killer stabs a person in the face, it's typically incredibly personal. There is a level of hatred and cruelty, and oftentimes it can indicate that it comes from a place of jealousy. Like, that's typically when you see that extensive injuries on the face and her chest and abdomen, but a lot of wounds on her face, which you don't see necessarily in all stabbing cases. So the chest and the abdomen and sometimes the back, those are pretty common areas.
Yeah, because face is not to kill, right?
Face is just so personal. And again, to ruin someone's face, a lot of experts believe it stems from jealousy. So keep it in mind later. Gwen was stabbed multiple times, just face, chest, abdomen. She was missing an ear. She had wounds all over her arms and hands, indicating that she fought till her very last breath. Her hair was completely matted with dried blood. Louis' body was just as bad. The police counted 51 stab wounds on his body. Let me repeat that. 51 stab wounds on a 16-year-old's body. How can anyone ever hate a 16-year-old so much to stab them, I mean, even once? But 51 times? Like, it doesn't make sense. Their bodies were so badly damaged, the morgue workers had to physically sew the teenagers back together before their parents could hold a funeral. The investigators that were looking into the case, their initial working theory is that, okay, attackers came into the McGuad house since, they're going off of Janice's statements as well as the evidence. Maybe the attackers, they were looking to target one of the better off families in the area. They most likely thought that the house was going to be empty, but they came across the 3 McGuad children and all hell broke loose. That was the running theory. That was the very initial theory. But when they're taking log of everything at the crime scene, just laying around in plain sight, there are so many objects of value. TVs, phones, laptops. I mean, if these are thieves that are willing to kill teenagers, innocent children, I feel like they would steal on their way out. And it's not like they were hearing police sirens on their way. So very quickly, the angle of burglary gone wrong, it was dropped. The next runner-up as a theory was a family dispute over land. So Lavella had siblings, and there have been reports prior that Lavella and her siblings had gotten into these fights over land. Maybe some of the siblings were jealous enough to hurt the McGuads? Maybe they thought that they could get the McGuads to hand over some land if their children were now dead? But the evidence wasn't adding up with that either. I'm sure the police checked the alibis and the motives because in the end they ruled that theory out too. So now they're out of options. The family, the public, they all want answers. I mean, this is terrifying to every single family in the area. I think whenever children are involved, it's a huge deal. And like, don't even get me started on what's going on in the US. But, when even children aren't safe, you feel like, what is wrong with society? Like, we need to do something drastic now. People are demanding answers and change. Like, they're in their homes. So the police, they form a special investigations unit focused on this crime, and the mayor puts up a reward for $5,000 for anyone with information that would lead to the arrest of the attackers. Meanwhile, the police go back to the crime scene. They're like, we gotta search through everything again. This is how we're gonna break this case wide open. They bring in forensics teams. They're combing through the place. And I'm not sure why they didn't follow up with some of these leads to begin with, but they finally decide, we gotta search the perimeter of the house. Not just inside the house, not just the living room, but like outside. And it's not just the backyard. They're going a little bit further than that. They're expanding their search scope. And that's when they come across this irrigation creek near the McGuad house. So it's like a small pond. And I guess since they weren't looking for a body or even a murder weapon, they just didn't think to search it until later. They got incredibly lucky. There in the creek was a little plastic bag. It felt like someone had tried to throw it down the creek and they assumed the water would carry it out, but the plastic bag got caught on a tree branch. So it's just stuck, swaying in the water. They drag it out and inside are bloody clothes. The killers after the murder had taken the time to change their clothes, put it in a little plastic baggie, tie it up, and throw it into the creek. Okay, now they're getting somewhere. So with this in mind, they're feeling a boost of confidence, okay? They start combing through the McGuad family house again, and they're searching for anything at all that might seem even remotely suspicious. Meanwhile, the netizens, they're doing their own little investigation. And the police, they explored the burglary gone wrong theory, the land dispute theory, but there was one theory that nobody really wanted to be the first to say. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it just feels almost politically incorrect. It feels wrong. It feels cancelable to be like, we think the survivor did it. Like, even just saying that, that's crazy, right? I mean, normally I'm like, don't say it then. If you think you're going to get canceled, don't say it because you're probably, like, don't come up with these theories.
Wait, did people think of that right away?
Yeah, like, netizens were like, I don't really want to say it. They're trying to, like, come up with roundabout ways of being like, well, there's a few parts. Nobody wants to be like, I think the survivor killed them. The netizens did have some strong points, though. And normally I'm against these types of theories because more often than not, they're not true and it just ends up hurting the survivor even more. But I'm going to walk you through some of the biggest points of contention. Point 1, the freaking bath. The bath, okay, this was the weirdest part. This is the part in the case where immediately my little radars are going off. Like, it's very strange. When Cruz, the father, found her in her room after he found his 2 children murdered in the living room, he was just so happy that she was alive. He was so happy that she wasn't injured. But she's soaking wet. And she explains to him, once the screams of her siblings stopped, she took a bath because she was so nervous. Again, what an oddly vulnerable position to put yourself in when there were just 3 homicidal attackers in your home. I think that's even a nightmare to most people. Being in a bath when intruders break in. You just don't feel safe and secured. That's why when you're like showering, you're trying to open your eyes and you're like, I gotta keep looking. Even Cruz said, when I heard that and when the shock of my kids passing wore off, I just couldn't stop thinking about that part. He didn't want to, but he couldn't help but wonder, like, why? Like, wouldn't a more natural reaction to be either run to your siblings' bodies, keep hiding under the bed until someone found you, or maybe even run out of the house? Netizens speculated in a very roundabout way initially that she took a shower to get all the blood off of her after she stabbed her siblings. Again, Louis was stabbed 51 times. That's just on his body. That's not including the injuries on Gwen's. Another point of contention was the fact that Janice didn't come downstairs when she heard Cruz yelling their names. The house isn't massive, and from where her bedroom was, I mean, she could hear him banging on the front door, screaming the kids' names, running around to the back of the house. She didn't even scream back. She didn't alert him that she was in the house. Nothing. She stayed hidden, and she didn't come out until she heard him come across his children's bodies in the living room. But there's bigger points to be made. The third point is the room that Janice hid in was ransacked. She said the attackers entered the room and they just didn't see her hiding under the bed and they ransacked her entire room. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. And the house really isn't that big, so if she ran away when the attackers were already inside the house, wouldn't at least one of the 3 attackers had seen her run to her room? And one of the first